The stars looked different from inside a Zintharian prison cell. Henry Clark sat on the cold metal bench, his gray hair falling across his weathered forehead as he stared through the energy barrier that kept him confined. At 72 years old, he had thought his days of adventure were behind him. He had been wrong. 3 days ago, Henry had been aboard the civilian transport ship Aurora's Hope, traveling to the outer colonies as an observer for the United Earth government. It was supposed to be a simple trip, nothing more than a retired admiral taking one last look at humanity's expansion into the stars. He had spent his career building Earth's defense forces, training officers and preparing humanity for whatever dangers might lurk in the darkness between worlds. Now, in what should have been his peaceful retirement, he found himself a prisoner of the Zintharian Empire. The attack had come without warning. The Aurora's Hope had been passing through the Kepler Junction, a neutral zone between human and Zintharian space, when 3 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel and surrounded them. The transport's captain had immediately sent out distress signals and tried to explain that they were on a peaceful mission. The Zintharians had not cared. They boarded the ship, stunned the crew with energy weapons, and took everyone prisoner. Henry had been separated from the others almost immediately. The Zintharians had scanned the ship's computers and discovered his identity. A retired Earth admiral was exactly the kind of prize they wanted. Within hours, he was on a Zintharian cruiser, bound for the Galactic Council chambers on Zenith Prime. The journey had given Henry time to think. He knew the Zintharians well enough from intelligence reports. They were a reptilian species, tall and powerful, with scales that ranged from deep green to dark red. They had conquered 3 star systems through military might and ruled their empire with an iron fist. More importantly, they were proud, perhaps too proud. They saw other species as inferior, especially humans, whom they viewed as weak newcomers to the galactic stage. Now, as Henry sat in his cell aboard the station orbiting Zenith Prime, he could hear voices in the corridor outside. Zintharian guards were talking, their hissing language punctuated by what sounded like laughter. He had learned enough of their tongue during his career to understand bits and pieces of their conversation. They were talking about him, about how the great Galactic Council would enjoy seeing a human elder dragged before them in chains. The door to his cell suddenly opened. 4 Zintharian soldiers entered, their armor gleaming under the harsh lights. The leader, a tall specimen with dark red scales, gestured at Henry with his weapon. "Get up, human. It is time for you to face the council." Henry rose slowly, his joints aching from the uncomfortable bench. He had kept himself in good shape for a man his age, but 3 days of captivity had taken their toll. He straightened his back and met the guard's eyes without fear. He had faced death before many times. 4 alien soldiers did not intimidate him. They led him through the winding corridors of Zenith Prime. The station was enormous, a neutral ground where the Galactic Council met to discuss matters affecting all spacefaring species. Henry had read about it but had never expected to see it under these circumstances. The halls were filled with beings from across the galaxy, creatures of every imaginable shape and size. Some stopped to stare at the human prisoner being led past them. Others simply ignored him. Finally, they reached the council chambers. The doors were massive, carved from some dark stone that seemed to absorb light. They opened silently, revealing the vast room beyond. The chamber was circular, with tiered seating rising up on all sides. At the center was a raised platform where speakers could address the council. Sitting in the seats above were representatives of 12 different alien species, each one a voting member of the Galactic Council. Henry's guards pushed him forward onto the platform. He stumbled slightly but caught himself, refusing to fall. As he stood there alone in the center of the chamber, he took a moment to study the council members. He recognized some species from his studies. The crystalline beings were Valorians, known for their wisdom and neutrality. The floating gas creatures were Aryans, masters of atmospheric engineering. And there, in the largest seats, were the Zintharians. Lord Crexith, the Zintharian ambassador, rose from his seat. He was enormous, even for his species, standing nearly 8 feet tall. His scales were a deep crimson and his eyes glowed with an amber light. He wore elaborate robes that marked his status, and when he spoke, his voice echoed through the chamber. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," Crexith began, his voice dripping with false courtesy, "I have brought before you proof of human arrogance and trespass. This creature was captured in Zintharian space, aboard a vessel that had no authorization to be there. Henry opened his mouth to object, but one of the guards behind him struck him in the back with the butt of an energy rifle. The blow drove the air from his lungs and sent him to his knees. He heard laughter ripple through some sections of the council chamber. Crexith continued, pacing back and forth in his elevated seat. Look at this specimen. This is what humans send to explore the stars. An old, weak creature that can barely stand. Is this the mighty species that claims to deserve a place among us? Is this the race that dares to establish colonies in space that rightfully belongs to the Zintharian Empire? More laughter. Henry slowly pushed himself back to his feet, his ribs aching from the blow. He kept his face neutral, showing no pain. The human government, Crexith went on, has repeatedly ignored our warnings. They have placed their settlements in sectors that we have claimed for expansion. They have refused to acknowledge Zintharian superiority in this region of space, and so we have decided to send them a message they cannot ignore. The ambassador turned to face Henry directly. We demand that Earth remove all colonies from the disputed sectors within 10 solar cycles. If they refuse, the Zintharian fleet will remove them by force. We will sweep your pathetic outpost from the stars as easily as one wipes dust from a table. The chamber erupted in noise. Some council members seemed shocked by the aggressive demand. Others appeared amused. A few looked concerned. The Valorian representative, a being that resembled a sculpture of living crystal, raised a limb for attention. Ambassador Crexith. The Valorian's voice chimed like bells. These are serious accusations and demands. Does the human government have a representative here to respond? I am here, a voice called from the entrance to the chamber. All eyes turned to see a young man in a formal Earth diplomatic uniform walking down the aisle toward the central platform. Henry recognized him from briefings. Kevin Grant, one of Earth's promising young ambassadors, assigned to the Galactic Council Liaison Office. Kevin reached the platform and stood beside Henry, offering the older man a brief nod of respect before turning to address the council. Honored members, I am Kevin Grant, representing the United Earth government. The accusations made by Ambassador Crexith are false. The Aurora's hope was traveling through neutral space, not Zintharian territory. We have navigation logs to prove this. Crexith waved a clawed hand dismissively. Your so-called neutral space is actually ancient Zintharian territory, claimed by my ancestors thousands of years ago. We have historical records to support this. Historical claims from thousands of years ago do not supersede current borders agreed upon by this very council, Kevin responded, his voice steady despite his youth. The territories in question were designated as open to settlement by any spacefaring species in the Treaty of Enough. Crexith's roar shook the chamber. The Zintharian Empire does not debate with children and old men. We have stated our terms. 10 solar cycles, or we will take by force what is rightfully ours. The Zintharian ambassador turned his attention back to Henry, a cruel smile spreading across his reptilian features. Perhaps we should ask the old human what he thinks. You once commanded Earth's military forces, did you not? Tell me, Ancient One, do you truly believe your primitive fleet could stand against the might of Zintharian warships? Henry remained silent, his blue eyes fixed on Crexith without blinking. Nothing to say? Crexith laughed. Of course not. You know the truth. Humans are weak. Your species fights among themselves over scraps of dirt on your single planet, while we conquered star systems. Your lifespans are laughably short. Your bodies are fragile. You have no natural weapons, no armor, nothing but your pride and your ridiculous optimism. Other council members began to join in the mockery. An insectoid representative clicked in what Henry assumed was laughter. I have studied human biology, the insect creature buzzed. They require precise environmental conditions to survive. Too hot, they die. Too cold, they die. Wrong air mixture, they die. How such a fragile species ever reached the stars is a mystery. They probably stumbled into space technology by accident, suggested another voice from the upper tiers. More laughter followed. Crexith leaned forward, his massive form looming over the platform. Look at him, he said, gesturing at Henry. This withered relic is what Earth sends on diplomatic missions. This is their mighty military mind? He can barely walk without wheezing. His skin is wrinkled like old leather. His hair has gone gray from age. This is what we are supposed to fear? The laughter that had filled the council chamber died instantly. Henry's words hung in the air like the silence after a thunderclap. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then, slowly, the mockery began again. But this time it sounded forced, uncertain. Krexith recovered first, throwing his head back in a booming laugh. "Did you hear that? The old man threatens us. The ancient human who can barely stand speaks of war." He turned to address the other council members. Perhaps age has addled his mind. Perhaps humans become senile in their final years. More laughter followed, but Henry noticed it was not as enthusiastic as before. Some council members were not laughing at all. The Valorian representative, Councillor Thane, leaned forward with interest, crystal facets catching the light. The Aryan delegation floated silently, their gaseous forms swirling in patterns that Henry could not interpret. "I am perfectly sane," Henry said, his voice still quiet but somehow commanding attention. "And I am giving you a warning, not a threat." "There is a difference." "A warning?" Krexith scoffed. "What could humans possibly do to threaten the Zintharian Empire? Your fleet is a fraction of ours. Your technology is inferior. Your soldiers are weak. You have been in space for barely a century while we have ruled the stars for millennia." Henry nodded slowly. "Everything you say about our numbers is true. You have more ships. You have older technology. You have conquered more worlds." He paused, his eyes scanning the assembled council. "But you have never fought humans." "Because you are not worth fighting," Krexith shot back. "You are insects to be brushed aside." "Then let me tell you about insects," Henry said. He took a step forward on the platform, his posture straightening despite his age. When he spoke again, his voice carried the authority of a lifetime spent in command. "Let me tell you about humanity. Let me tell you what we are and what we have done, so that you can make an informed decision about whether you truly want this war." Executor Vran raised a crystal in hand. "The human wishes to speak. Let us hear what he has to say. We are a council of reason, after all. Proceed, human elder." Henry took a breath. "My name is Henry Clark. I am 72 years old, which is old for a human, but not ancient. I served in Earth's military for 50 years. I fought in wars, I commanded fleets, and I trained the officers who now protect our worlds. Before I talk about humanity's future, let me talk about our past." He began to pace slowly across the platform, his hands clasped behind his back in a posture he had adopted thousands of times when addressing cadets at the military academy. "Earth is our home world. It is the only planet we knew for most of our history. It is a beautiful world full of life and resources. And for most of our existence as a species, we spent our time trying to kill each other." A few council members shifted in their seats. Kevin Grant, standing to the side, looked worried about where Henry was going with this. "Humans have been at war for as long as we have recorded history," Henry continued. "We fought over territory, over resources, over ideas, over religion, over things so trivial that looking back we cannot understand why they seemed important. We developed thousands of ways to kill each other. Swords, spears, arrows, guns, bombs, poisons, diseases. We became very, very good at warfare." "So you admit your species is barbaric," Krexith said. "Thank you for making our point for us." Henry smiled slightly, but there was no humor in it. "I am not finished, Ambassador. Let me tell you about our world wars. The first one happened about 200 years ago. It involved most of the nations on our planet. We killed approximately 17 million of our own species in 4 years. We used machine guns, artillery, chemical weapons, and tactics so brutal that entire generations were traumatized." The chamber had gone quiet. Even the Zintharian supporters seemed to be listening now. "We learned nothing from that war," Henry said. 20 years later, we started another one. The Second World War was worse. Much worse. We killed approximately 75 million humans in 6 years. We developed weapons that could destroy entire cities in seconds. We committed atrocities that still haunt us. We built factories whose only purpose was to murder millions of people. We fought in deserts, jungles, oceans, frozen wastelands, and cities. We learned to use every environment as a battlefield." He stopped pacing and turned to face Krexith directly. "And then, at the end of that war, we developed atomic weapons. Nuclear bombs that released the power of the sun itself. We dropped 2 of them on cities, vaporizing hundreds of thousands of people instantly. And we did not stop there. We built more, bigger ones. Thousands of them, weapons capable of destroying all life on Earth several times over. If you had such weapons, why did you not destroy yourselves?" asked one of the Insectoid Council members, genuine curiosity in its buzzing voice. "That is an excellent question," Henry replied. "For 50 years we lived under the threat of total annihilation. Two massive alliances of nations pointed these weapons at each other, ready to launch at any moment. We called it the Cold War because we never actually used the weapons. We came close many times. There were incidents where a single person's decision was all that stood between humanity and extinction. But somehow we survived. He turned back to the full council. During those 50 years of Cold War, we did not stop developing weapons. We created biological weapons that could kill millions through disease. We created chemical weapons that could poison entire regions. We built missiles that could strike anywhere on our planet in minutes. We developed tactics for urban warfare, guerrilla warfare, naval warfare, air warfare, and space warfare. We studied military history going back thousands of years and learned from every conflict our species had ever fought. And yet you claim to be civilized? Krexith challenged. No, Henry said simply. We do not claim to be civilized. We claim to be survivors. There is a difference. Every species on Earth that tried to compete with humanity is either extinct or domesticated. We climbed to the top of our food chain through intelligence and ruthlessness. We mastered fire when we were still living in caves. We hunted animals larger and stronger than ourselves. We survived ice ages, plagues, floods, and droughts. We built civilizations, saw them fall, and built new ones on their ruins. He gestured to his own body. You mock me for being old and weak. You are right that human bodies are fragile. We have no natural armor like Syntherians. We have no natural weapons like claws or venom. We cannot survive in extreme temperatures. We need oxygen to breathe and water to drink. Our senses are mediocre compared to many Earth species. By every physical measure, we should have gone extinct millions of years ago. Then how did you survive? Counselor Thane asked, the Valorian's voice chiming with genuine interest. Intelligence, Henry answered. Adaptability, persistence, and an absolutely terrifying refusal to give up. When we could not fight a predator with our bodies, we invented weapons. When we could not survive the cold, we invented clothing and fire. When we could not run fast enough, we domesticated animals to carry us. When we could not fly, we built machines that could. Every single disadvantage we had, we overcame through technology and determination. He turned in a slow circle, addressing the entire council. You need to understand something about humans. We are endurance predators. On Earth, we were not the fastest or the strongest, so we developed a different strategy. We would find prey and chase it. Not for minutes or hours, but for days if necessary. We would track animals until they collapsed from exhaustion, and then we would kill them. We are patient. We are persistent. And we do not stop. This is ancient history, Krexith interjected. What does it matter how you hunted animals on your primitive world? It matters because it explains what we are, Henry said. Let me tell you about modern human warfare. During our world wars, we fought in temperatures ranging from 50 degrees below zero to 50 degrees above. We fought in jungles, deserts, mountains, and oceans. We fought while hungry, while cold, while sick, while wounded. We developed tactics for every situation. Urban combat, forest combat, desert combat, mountain combat, naval combat, aerial combat, submarine warfare, amphibious assault, airborne operations, combined arms tactics. He paused, letting that sink in. We learned how to coordinate armies of millions. We learned logistics, supply lines, intelligence gathering, and counterintelligence. We learned how to feed, equip, and move massive forces across entire continents. We learned how to maintain morale, treat wounds, and replace losses. We became very, very efficient at warfare. The Syntherian military has all of these capabilities, Krexith said dismissively. Perhaps, Henry acknowledged. But when was your last major war? Your intelligence reports say the Syntherian Empire has not faced a serious military challenge in 80 years. Your officer corps has no combat experience. Your tactics are based on outdated doctrines. Your ships are designed to intimidate minor species, not to fight a determined enemy. Krexith's scales rippled with anger. How dare you? I dare because I am trying to save lives, Henry interrupted, his voice rising for the first time. Syntherian lives as well as human lives. You think war with humanity will be easy. You think you will sweep through our colonies and we will surrender. You are wrong. Catastrophically wrong. The transmission from Zenith Prime reached Earth 3 hours later, traveling through the network of relay stations that connected human space to the wider galaxy. It arrived at the United Earth Command headquarters in Geneva just after midnight local time, but Admiral Patricia Moore was still awake in her office when the communication came through. Moore was 63 years old, with short silver hair and sharp green eyes that missed nothing. She had served with Henry Clark for 20 years before he retired, and she had learned everything she knew about military strategy from him. When she saw Henry's face appear on her screen, bruised and standing before the Galactic Council in restraints, her jaw clenched. When she heard his warning and his speech about human warfare, she allowed herself a thin smile. Within 15 minutes, she had assembled the senior military staff in the command center. Within an hour, the president of the United Earth government was being briefed. By dawn, the entire human government was mobilizing for war. President Alan Foster sat in his office in New York, watching the recording of Henry's speech for the third time. He was a tall man in his 50s who had come to power on a platform of peaceful expansion and cooperation with alien species. Now he faced a decision that would define his presidency and possibly humanity's future in space. "What are our options?" he asked Admiral Moore, who had traveled to New York for the emergency meeting. Moore stood beside a holographic display showing human space and the surrounding territories. "Diplomatically, we can continue negotiations. Ambassador Grant is working with sympathetic council members, particularly the Valorians. They seem concerned about Xyntharian aggression." "But you do not think diplomacy will work," Foster said. It was not a question. "No, sir. The Xyntharians have made their position clear. They see us as weak and they want our colony worlds. They have given us 10 days to abandon settlements that took us years to establish. If we comply, we show weakness to the entire galaxy. If we refuse, they will attack." Foster rubbed his temples. "How many civilians are in the disputed sectors?" "Approximately 300,000 across 7 colony worlds. The largest is New Harmony, with about 90,000 people. These are established settlements, sir. Farms, factories, families. We cannot simply evacuate them all in 10 days even if we wanted to. And militarily, can we defend them?" Moore touched the display and it shifted to show fleet positions. "We have approximately 300 warships currently in service. About 60% are patrol vessels and escorts. The rest are cruisers, destroyers, and carriers. The Xyntharian fleet is estimated at over 800 ships, though many are older models. So they outnumber us nearly 3 to 1. In total numbers, yes. But numbers are not everything, sir." Henry was right about one thing in his speech. The Xyntharians have not fought a real war in decades. Their tactics are outdated, their officer corps is inexperienced, and their ships are designed for intimidation rather than combat efficiency. Foster looked at her carefully. "You think we can win?" "I think we can defend our colonies and make the Xyntharians reconsider the cost of aggression. Whether that counts as winning depends on your definition." The president was quiet for a long moment. "What do you need?" "Authorization to mobilize the reserve fleet and recall all active vessels to defensive positions. Permission to begin covert reconnaissance operations in Xyntharian space, and the authority to engage if they cross into our territory." "If I give you that authority, we are committing to war." "With respect, sir. The Xyntharians committed us to war when they captured Henry Clark and made their demands. We are simply choosing whether to fight on our terms or theirs." Foster signed the orders. Across human space, the military machinery began to move. Warships and distant patrols received encrypted orders to return to the core systems. Reserve vessels maintained in orbital shipyards were brought online and crewed. Officers on leave were recalled to duty. Training exercises were converted to combat preparations. In orbit around Mars, Captain Lisa Hayes received her orders aboard the Earth defense ship Sentinel. The Sentinel was a stealth reconnaissance vessel, designed for intelligence gathering deep in hostile territory. Lisa was 38, a compact woman with dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun and brown eyes that could analyze a tactical situation in seconds. She had served under Henry Clark during the Mars Rebellion 6 years ago, when separatist forces had tried to break away from Earth. Henry had taught her that information won wars before the first shot was fired. Now, as she read her orders, she understood what was being asked of her. The Sentinel was to penetrate Xyntharian space, map their fleet positions, and identify weaknesses in their defenses. It was dangerous, possibly suicidal, but it was also absolutely necessary. "Attention, crew," she announced over the ship's intercom. "This is the captain. We have received new orders. We are going dark in 30 minutes. I will brief all senior officers in the conference room in 15. Hayes out." Her first officer, Commander Jake Phillips, appeared in the doorway of her ready room. Jake was a veteran, 50 years old, with gray at his temples and the calm demeanor of someone who had seen combat before. I assume we are not going on a patrol mission, Captain. We are going into Xantharian space. Full stealth operations, intelligence gathering for what comes next. Jake nodded slowly. The crew will follow you. They know what is at stake. I know they will. That is what worries me. I need them cautious, not brave. We are a scout ship, not a battleship. Our job is to see without being seen. Over the next 3 days, the Sentinel made its way toward the border of Xantharian space, its stealth systems masking its presence from sensors. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Admiral Moore was coordinating the largest military mobilization in human history. Commander Susan Martinez arrived at Earth Command headquarters, still in her civilian clothes. She had retired from active duty 2 years ago to teach at the military academy, but when the recall orders came, she did not hesitate. Susan was 45, a brilliant tactical officer who had pioneered many of the human fleet's combat doctrines. Now she found herself assigned to Admiral Moore's personal staff as a strategic planning officer. "You wanted to see me, Admiral?" she asked, entering Moore's office. Moore looked up from her displays. "Susan, thank you for coming back. I need your help with something." "Whatever you need, ma'am." Moore pulled up a star map. "The Xantharians are going to attack New Harmony first. It is the largest colony in the disputed sector, and the most valuable. Their 7th Fleet is currently stationed at the Krevak shipyards, approximately 4 light-years from New Harmony. Our intelligence suggests they will move against the colony as soon as the 10-day deadline expires. And we are not going to let them have an easy time of it," Susan said, studying the map. "Exactly. I am assembling our 3rd and 5th Fleets to defend New Harmony. But I do not want a defensive battle. I want to destroy the 7th Fleet before they can retreat and regroup." Susan leaned closer to the display, her eyes scanning the tactical data. "The Xantharians will expect us to defend the colony directly. But if we position our forces here and here," she pointed to 2 locations near the colony, "we could create a pincer movement. Let them commit to attacking the colony, then close the trap." "That is what I was thinking. But it requires perfect timing and accurate intelligence on their approach vector. That is where the Sentinel comes in. Captain Hayes can give us the information we need, if she can get it without being detected." Meanwhile, 4 light-years away, Lisa Hayes and the crew of the Sentinel were doing exactly that. The ship drifted through the outer reaches of the Krevak system, its sensors passively collecting data on the massive Xantharian shipyards orbiting the system's gas giant. "I count 47 capital ships," her tactical officer reported quietly, as if speaking too loudly might give away their position. "Mostly cruisers and destroyers. 3 battlecruisers, and a command carrier." "Fleet composition?" Lisa asked. 7th Fleet markings. "Looks like they are preparing for deployment. Supply ships are loading provisions. Some of the warships are running engine tests." Lisa recorded everything, her ship's computers analyzing the Xantharian vessels, noting their configurations, their apparent capabilities, their formations. This information would be crucial when the shooting started. "Captain," her communications officer said suddenly, "I am detecting a tight beam transmission from the command carrier. It is encrypted, but the destination beacon is in the direction of New Harmony." "They are coordinating their attack," Lisa said. "Time to leave. Helm, plot a course back to friendly space. Maximum stealth. Do not give them any reason to notice us." The Sentinel slipped away into the darkness, carrying vital intelligence back to Earth Command. Back on Zenith Prime, Henry Clark remained in his cell, but his circumstances had changed. Guards who had previously mocked him now watched him with wary respect. One young guard, a Xantharian named Kresh, had begun speaking with him during the quiet hours between shifts. Kresh was younger than most soldiers, his green scales still bright with youth. "Is it true what you said?" he asked one night. "About human wars killing millions?" "Yes," Henry replied. "We are not proud of it, but it is our history." "But why? Why would you fight among yourselves so much?" The 10th day arrived with the cold inevitability of sunrise. On Zenith Prime, Lord Krexith stood before the Galactic Council once more, his crimson scales gleaming with satisfaction. Henry Clark was brought to the chamber again, this time without restraints, though guards still flanked him. Kevin Grant stood nearby, his face showing the exhaustion of 10 days spent in desperate diplomatic efforts that had achieved nothing. "Honored members of the Council," Krexith announced, his voice filled with triumph. "The deadline has passed. The humans have refused to abandon their illegal colonies. Therefore, as I promised, the Xantharian Empire will remove them by force. At this moment, our 7th Fleet is en route to the colony called New Harmony. By tomorrow, that world will be under Xantharian control, and the humans will have learned a valuable lesson about their place in the galaxy. Some council members applauded. Others looked uncomfortable. Councillor Thane sat in crystalline silence, reflecting worried patterns of light. Henry stood quietly, his face unreadable. Kevin Grant wanted to say something, to protest, but diplomatic protocol had run its course. Now there was only war. "Do you have any final words, Admiral Clark?" Executor Vran asked, not unkindly. "Before we witness the consequences of your refusal to accept reasonable terms?" Henry looked up at the council. "I have said everything that needed to be said. Now you will see whether you should have listened." 5 light-years away from Zenith Prime, the Xantharian 7th Fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the New Harmony system. 47 warships emerged from the distorted space of FTL transit, their weapons already charging for battle. Admiral Vorath commanded the fleet from his flagship, the massive battlecruiser Dominant Fang. He was an experienced officer, though his experience came from suppressing minor rebellions and intimidating weaker species, not from fighting peer opponents. As his fleet organized into attack formation, he felt confident. The humans had only 15 ships defending New Harmony, according to intelligence reports. This would be over quickly. "All ships, report status," he ordered. One by one, his ship commanders confirmed they were ready for battle. The fleet formed into a standard Xantharian assault configuration, with battlecruisers at the center, cruisers on the flanks, and destroyers screening the formation. It was a formation designed to overwhelm through sheer mass and firepower. It had worked for centuries. "Scan the system," Vorath commanded. "Locate the human defenders." His tactical officer studied the displays. "Admiral, I am detecting 15 human vessels in orbit around the colony world as expected." "But—" The officer's voice trailed off uncertainly. "But what?" Vorath demanded. "Sir, I am also detecting what appears to be a debris field between our position and the planet. Approximately 3,000 objects varying in size from small asteroids to larger fragments." Vorath studied the display himself. The debris field was unusual but not alarming. It would slow their approach slightly, but nothing more. Navigate through it. Maintain formation. Prepare to engage the human defenders. What Admiral Vorath did not know was that the debris field had been carefully placed there over the past week. Each piece of debris contained sensors, communications relays, and in many cases mining charges converted into proximity mines. The field was not an obstacle. It was a trap. The 7th Fleet began moving through the debris field. On the far side of the planet, hidden from Xantharian sensors by the bulk of New Harmony itself, 60 human warships waited in absolute silence. Admiral Moore had positioned her 3rd and 5th Fleets perfectly, using the planet and the debris field to mask their presence. Aboard the destroyer Victory, Commander Jake Phillips watched his tactical display with practiced calm. He had been recalled from retirement specifically for this battle, and he commanded a squadron of 8 destroyers positioned on the fleet's northern flank. "All ships maintain stealth protocols. No active sensors. Wait for the signal." Similar orders were being repeated throughout the human fleet. Captain Lisa Hayes and the Sentinel remained at the edge of the system, still in stealth mode, coordinating real-time intelligence on the Xantharian fleet's movements and transmitting it to Admiral Moore. "Xantharian fleet is halfway through the debris field," Lisa reported over encrypted channels. "They have not altered their formation. They do not suspect anything." Admiral Moore sat in her command chair aboard the carrier Enterprise, watching the tactical plot with cold calculation. Everything depended on timing. She needed the Xantharian fleet to commit fully to their attack on the orbiting defense force before revealing her hidden ships. "Hold position," she ordered. "Let them see what they expect to see." The 15 human ships orbiting New Harmony were not there to win the battle. They were bait, and everyone aboard them knew it. Their orders were simple: engage the enemy, make them commit, and survive long enough for the trap to close. Among those 15 ships was the cruiser Defiant, commanded by Captain Rachel White, a 42-year-old officer who had spent her entire career preparing for a moment like this. "Xantharian fleet emerging from the debris field," her tactical officer reported. "They are targeting us." "All ships defensive formation," Rachel ordered. "Launch fighters." Prepare for evasive maneuvers. Make them work for it. The first shots of the war were fired by the Zintharians. Energy beams and missiles lanced across the space between the fleets, targeting the human defenders. Rachel's ships scattered, their smaller size and greater maneuverability allowing them to avoid the initial barrage. Return fire, Rachel commanded. Target their forward destroyers. Make them think we are trying to break through to hit their capital ships. Human missiles and mass drivers responded, slamming into Zintharian shields and armor. The human weapons were different from what the Zintharians expected. Where Zintharian weapons relied on massive energy discharges, human weapons were more diverse. Kinetic kill vehicles accelerated to incredible speeds, smart missiles that could evade point defense, electromagnetic pulse weapons that disrupted shields, cyber warfare packages that attempted to hack enemy systems. Admiral Vorath watched the engagement with satisfaction. The humans fight well for primitives, but they cannot stand against our firepower. All ships advance. Destroy them. The 7th Fleet surged forward, committing fully to the battle. That was exactly what Admiral Moore had been waiting for. Now, she said quietly, the debris field came alive. Thousands of mines detonated simultaneously, their explosions timed and positioned to create maximum disruption to the Zintharian formation. Ships that had been maintaining careful spacing suddenly found themselves too close together, their shields overlapping inefficiently, their weapons unable to target effectively without risking friendly fire. And then the rest of the human fleet appeared. 60 warships dropped their stealth systems and emerged from behind New Harmony. They came from above and below the orbital plane, from both sides of the planet, in a carefully coordinated maneuver that enclosed the Zintharian fleet in a three-dimensional cage of fire. All ships, engage at will, Admiral Moore ordered. Execute Pattern Midway. Pattern Midway was named after an ancient human naval battle. It focused on carrier-based fighters and long-range missile strikes to destroy enemy capital ships while keeping the human fleet at a distance, where their speed and maneuverability provided maximum advantage. 3 carriers launched their full complement of fighters, over 200 small craft that swarmed toward the disrupted Zintharian formation. Each fighter carried sophisticated missiles and operated under the control of AI systems assisted by human pilots, allowing for tactics impossible with conventional piloting. Lieutenant Commander Susan Martinez, coordinating the fighter wings from her position aboard Enterprise, watched the tactical display with fierce concentration. Alpha Wing, target the battlecruiser's engine section. Beta Wing, suppress their point defense. Gamma Wing, stand by for secondary strike. The fighters moved like a school of fish, individual units acting in coordination to create patterns that confused Zintharian targeting systems. When the Zintharians tried to track one fighter, 3 others would strike from different angles. Their point defense systems, designed to handle larger, slower targets, struggled to acquire the fast-moving human craft. Aboard the dominant Fang, Admiral Vorath realized with growing horror that he had made a terrible mistake. All ships reform defensive positions. Where did those human ships come from? Unknown, sir. They were not on our sensors. Obviously, they were not on our sensors. Vorath roared. Get me targeting solutions. Return fire. But the 7th Fleet was already in chaos. The mine detonations had broken their formation. Human ships were attacking from multiple vectors. Fighter craft were everywhere like insects swarming a much larger predator, and the Zintharians, for all their superior size and numbers, were discovering that they did not know how to fight this kind of battle. Commander Jake Phillips led his destroyer squadron in a slashing attack on the Zintharian right flank. Target the cruiser Venom's Reach. All ships fire on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. 8 destroyers fired simultaneously, their combined firepower overwhelming the cruiser's shields and punching through its armor. The Venom's Reach shuddered, explosions rippling along its hull. It did not die. The news of the defeat at New Harmony spread through Zintharian space like fire through dry grass. In the capital city of Crethon, ordinary citizens gathered in public squares to watch news broadcasts that showed their mighty 7th Fleet limping home, battered and broken. The military pride that had sustained the Zintharian Empire for generations took its first serious blow in living memory. But Lord Krexith was not ready to admit defeat. Over the next 6 days, he rallied support among the more aggressive members of the Galactic Council and pressured the Zintharian military command to launch new offensives. If humanity had won one battle, Krexith declared, it was only luck. The Empire would crush them through sheer numbers and determination. Admiral Moore had predicted this response. She knew the Zintharians could not afford to look weak, not after such a public challenge. So while diplomats talked and council members debated, she prepared for the next phase of the war. On Earth, President Foster addressed the United Government Assembly. "Fellow citizens," he said, his face grave but determined. 6 days ago, human forces won a defensive victory at New Harmony. We hoped this would convince the Zintharians to seek peace. Instead, our intelligence indicates they are preparing additional attacks across multiple systems. Therefore, I am authorizing our military to take whatever actions necessary to protect our colonies and our people." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "We did not want this war. We offered peace, compromise, and cooperation. But we will not surrender our homes. We will not abandon our people, and we will show the galaxy that humanity stands united against aggression." The Assembly voted unanimously to support the military effort. Across human space, colonies prepared for possible attack while the military mobilized every available ship. Admiral Vorath, commanding what remained of the 7th Fleet, received new orders from Zintharian High Command. He was to join with the 4th and 9th Fleets for a massive assault on 3 human colonies simultaneously. The combined force would number over 200 ships, more than enough to overwhelm human defenses even if they had prepared another trap. Vorath was not happy with these orders. He had seen how the humans fought. He knew they would not be easy to defeat. But he was a soldier, and soldiers followed orders. He began coordinating with the other fleet commanders, planning the assault. What Vorath did not know was that Captain Lisa Hayes and the Sentinel had been shadowing the Zintharian fleet movements since the battle at New Harmony. The stealth ship had penetrated deep into Zintharian space, recording communications, mapping fleet positions, and transmitting everything back to Admiral Moore. "They are planning a 3-pronged attack," Moore told her senior staff during a secure briefing. "The 4th Fleet will hit our mining colony at Kepler 7. The 9th Fleet targets our agricultural world at Harvest Prime. And what is left of the 7th Fleet will join a reserve force to attack our research station at Newton's Hope, Commander." Susan Martinez studied the tactical displays. "They are trying to spread us thin, force us to divide our fleet to protect multiple targets." "Yes," Moore agreed, "but they are making the same mistake as before. They think defensively. They expect us to try to protect everything. Instead, we are going to attack." The plan was risky, but it followed a principle that humans had learned centuries ago during their own wars. The best defense is a good offense. Rather than waiting for the Zintharians to attack, human forces would strike first at the shipyards and supply bases supporting the enemy fleets. Commander Jake Phillips received his orders aboard the Victory. His destroyer squadron, reinforced to 12 ships, would raid the Zintharian supply depot at Varkath Station. The mission was simple in concept but dangerous in execution. Get in, destroy as much as possible, and get out before reinforcements arrived. "This is going to be interesting," Jake said to his first officer as they reviewed the mission plan. "Interesting is one word for it," his XO replied. "Suicidal is another." "Probably. But if we pull it off, we cripple their ability to support offensive operations. Worth the risk." Similar strike forces were being organized across the human fleet. Small, fast squadrons would hit Zintharian logistics while the main battle fleets engaged the enemy in carefully chosen battles where human tactical advantages could be exploited. The second major engagement happened at Kepler 7. Admiral Moore had guessed correctly that the Zintharians would attack this colony first because of its strategic value. The mining operations there provided rare elements crucial to advanced technology. Losing it would hurt humanity economically and militarily. The Zintharian 4th Fleet, commanded by Admiral Threxus, arrived expecting to find the colony lightly defended. Instead, they encountered the full strength of the human 2nd Fleet, commanded by Vice Admiral Daniel Cross. Daniel was 55 years old, a tactical genius who had studied every battle in human history and adapted lessons from them to space combat. "They are coming in fast and aggressive," Daniel's tactical officer reported. "Looks like they learned from what happened to the 7th Fleet. They are not letting us surround them." "Good," Daniel said calmly. "That means they are scared. Scared enemies make mistakes. Let us make them more scared. Launch all fighters." Begin cyber warfare operations. Activate the minefield. The battle that followed was even more brutal than New Harmony. The Xantharians fought with desperate intensity, trying to prove they could beat human forces in straight combat. They pushed hard, accepting casualties that would have made previous Xantharian commanders retreat. But human forces had advantages beyond just tactics. Their ships were equipped with electronic warfare systems that could disrupt Xantharian communications and targeting. Their fighters used AI-assisted combat systems that allowed them to react faster than organic pilots alone could manage, and their weapons were specifically designed to exploit the weaknesses Lisa Hayes had identified in Xantharian ship design during her reconnaissance missions. The battle raged for 8 hours. Space filled with explosions, missile trails, and the flash of energy weapons. Both sides took heavy losses. But when it ended, the Fourth Fleet had been mauled even worse than the Seventh Fleet had been. Admiral Threxus withdrew with less than half his original force, and Kepler-7 remained in human hands. Meanwhile, Commander Jake Phillips and his squadron hit Varkath Station. The raid was a masterpiece of precision and timing. The destroyers dropped out of FTL right on top of the station, launched their full load of missiles, and jumped back into faster-than-light travel before the defending ships could effectively respond. The entire attack lasted less than 10 minutes, but it destroyed 6 months' worth of supplies and damaged the station badly enough that it would be out of operation for weeks. Similar raids struck Xantharian facilities across 3 star systems. Human forces were everywhere and nowhere, striking fast and disappearing before the Xantharians could mount a response. It was guerrilla warfare adapted to space combat, and the Xantharians had no effective counter for it. On Zenith Prime, the Galactic Council watched in stunned fascination as the war unfolded. The species that many had dismissed as primitive newcomers was systematically dismantling a major military power. Counselor Thane sought out Kevin Grant for a private conversation. "Your people are winning," Thane said, the Valorian's crystalline form reflecting concerned patterns. "We are surviving," Kevin corrected. "There is a difference. Every battle costs lives on both sides. Every ship destroyed represents people who will never go home. We take no pleasure in this, but you are winning," Thane insisted. "The Xantharians have lost nearly half their military fleet. Their economy is strained from the war effort. Their government is facing internal pressure to end the conflict. You could press your advantage, perhaps even invade Xantharian territory." Kevin looked shocked. "We would never do that. We fight to defend ourselves, not to conquer others. Once the Xantharians agree to peace, we will stop fighting immediately." "That is why you will truly win," Thane said thoughtfully. "Not because you can defeat them militarily, but because you know when to stop." Henry Clark, who had been allowed to join them in the garden, spoke up. "War is easy to start but hard to end. The trick is finding a way for both sides to walk away with something they can call victory, even if the reality is more complex." Over the next 3 days, 2 more battles occurred. Each time, human forces demonstrated superior tactics, training, and adaptability. The casualty count mounted on both sides, but the Xantharians were clearly losing the war of attrition. Their ships were being destroyed faster than they could be replaced. Their officer corps was depleted. Most importantly, their people were losing faith in their government's ability to win. On the 7th day after New Harmony, representatives from the Xantharian government contacted the Galactic Council requesting mediation for peace negotiations. Lord Crexith tried to block the request, but even he could see that continuing the war would lead to the complete destruction of Xantharian military power. Executor Vran called an emergency session of the Council. "We have before us a request from the Xantharian Empire to mediate peace talks with the human government. Given the circumstances, I recommend we approve this request immediately." The vote was unanimous. Even the species that had supported Xantharian